Good afternoon. Final session of the final day. How are we all doing? I would just like to say congratulations to you all for making it this far. Not everybody does, so well done, all of you. I hope you've had a good day today, if this is the only day you've been here. I hope you've had a fantastic couple of days, if you've managed to make it to both. We are finishing with a flourish, I do believe, with a fantastic panel and a fantastic conversation this afternoon. So just as we started today with keynotes that were very much talking about future of work and skills, we are closing today, it feels like it's bookending beautifully, with a conversation about skills and what skills employees may need and how do we ensure that they acquire them going forward. I'm not going to stand here and speak for very much longer. However, you are going to be tasked with asking questions, please. So the speakers have very kindly agreed to not do lots and lots and lots of presentations. We kind of figured it was towards the end of the day. So you're going to hear some short, sharp opinions, interventions from the speakers, and then it's over to you. So please have questions, challenge them, give them a little bit of a hard time, in the nicest possible way, and we will see how we go from there, okay? So without further ado at all, I'm going to hand you over to Michelle, and she is going to kick it all off.
Thank you, Julie. It's great to be here. I hear we might be competing with a cocktail making session, so hopefully a few more will start to come in to join the conversation. No, I'm really looking forward to having the debate. So a bit about the context. I was in the McKinsey session earlier today talking about future skills, and for those that don't know, Vodafone is a telecoms company, so we have mobile, fixed broadband customers, but we also connect and build digital societies, so our 5G network, IoT, Internet of Things, M-Pesa, our financial services platform in Africa. So we're seeing this shift towards new skills, looking at software engineering, cloud, etc. So we're seeing a much broader expansion on how we look at upskilling and reskilling. So a bit of context around what Vodafone is up to. For me, myself, I've been in L&D pretty much most of my career, a few twists and turns. I joined Vodafone to look after the Tech Academy, so it was very much upskilling across those skills that I just mentioned. And then 2 years ago, I moved into our skills transformation project team. So I was very lucky to learn alongside the Italian team as they went through a reskilling pilot, took a lot of learnings and have applied it to our new skills career and learning platform, which is 1 month, 1 day old today, which is very exciting. It's still very much in MVP, and we're learning, and we're still on this journey, so we don't have all the answers at Vodafone. But I thought, as a teaser, to start the conversation, I would share some of my points of view and some key insights, and I'd love to see how they resonate and maybe start the conversation as we get into the Q&A later on. Everything is data-driven now, so for those in L&D, we do upskilling. Yes, we look at learning strategy, we build capability, but we don't really know how many skills we've got in the business, what level they are, where we need to move them to. So to do anything around skills, you need to plug into your workforce planning team, you need to think about supply and demand, and that's exactly what we're starting to do, which requires skills-based job architecture. So I was lucky enough to be involved in doing this within Vodafone. You can buy them. Maybe I'd recommend buying them after the experiences that we went through. But we did all the skills mapping that is basically feeding the new platform that we've gone live with. And I think what's great about this, when we talk about reskilling, and I mentioned to Julie, I think we need a rebrand. I'd love to see us move more into organic upskilling. So having the right architecture in place that people can identify the skills they have and the careers they want to develop will mean that we stop spending money on expensive reskilling interventions, which is where I'm probably starting from. There will still be need for reskilling in certain situations. This is coupled where I'm seeing more of a trend, transversal power skills. McKinsey again spoke about this morning. From my side, I think from the mapping work, we're seeing similar skills being mapped across many more career groups, which is interesting because that supports broader careers. And I think also roles are changing so quickly that if we can start to give everyone these broader skills and move them into a job to learn on the job, then we're just going to have better internal mobility. So we're looking at this and potentially linking it into our culture as well. So I think that's probably another way of doing it. So we hear about standard skills, but actually making that relevant for your business is probably also quite key. I was in the session with Bob earlier. I don't know anyone else. Brilliant. I loved that. I didn't change my slide. He said, didn't like blended learning. So I'll go away later and change it. But I do passionately believe that learning is not just the 10% that we send people on to a course. And it's all about, for us, we're looking at projects and experiences. So how can people learn a skill and then apply it in a safe space? Maybe they can try out and test new careers by going and completing a project. I will be doing more research in the performance and learning and the workflow, because I think that is still something that we need to address. D&I, really hot topic for me. If you haven't read Brotopia, highly recommend the read. So I think this is all about how we as L&D HR professionals have a responsibility to ensure we have diversity of talent as we build digital societies. I'll leave you with the question, who is building the metaverse right now and designing the interactions and experiences? Slightly scary. Another trend is the hiring manager. We've heard about the middle managers, and this is going to be key for any upskilling, reskilling intervention. I'm guilty of this, wanting to hire or bring in the experts, people that have done the job before. As jobs evolve, we can't find the experts, talent is scarce. We need to make room in our organisation and job architecture to have people that can grow and develop in role, and if they have the baseline skills, then they can develop on the job. And then I'll close with this continuous learning culture. We need to build skills to remain relevant in our jobs today that are evolving so quickly, and so we need to be learning all the time, not just going to courses. We are learning as we do our work, but also we need to learn to stay relevant for today and also in the future for how things are going to evolve. And I thought I'd share what our skills platform looks like in MVP. So you can see on the left is a snapshot of my skills profile. We deliberately, I don't like the word assessment because I want this to make this user-friendly. So this is my skills profile. The mapping is the core mapping, and then the other skills is how I build and add all the skills that I've got throughout my career. Optional self-manager, so the manager rating is an optional piece. But essentially, the next step will be I can start to find open positions in Vodafone or future career opportunities and see where my match is, what are the skills I need to develop. So we have a long way to go. We want to link in projects and experts, and we will be looking at coaching to support a more holistic learning experience, but hopefully that's given some ideas for thought, and I'd love to see how you're also doing something quite similar. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the view, or sort of part of the view, certainly from Vodafone. Yeah. And so now we're going to get a different perspective. So Kenny's from Unite, and he's going to take the stage now.
Like most trade unions, I tend to work better when I'm on my feet. Right, my name's Kenny Barron. I'm the head of lifelong learning. I'd be surprised if most of you haven't heard about our trade union. It's Unite the Union, and we have well over over a million members. I'm going to come from a slightly different perspective, because I'm going to talk about what is the support in the workplace itself. And what I've put up here is about the role of the union learning representatives. These are employees that are in the company, and many of our members do have less than a level 2 qualification. So when you talk about skills, not grading, etc., there's a barrier to start off with. And who better, in my view, to be able to assist with that is what we call the union learning representatives. England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, you'd be pleased to know that currently is estimated we have over 44,000 union learning representatives. That's not just in Unite, that's across the whole of the trade union movement. And what we also have is what we call our learning agreements, and often when you talk about an agreement with a trade union, people shy away. But this is actually about an agreement between the employer, the resident trade union, and the individual learner themselves about what they want to achieve, what do they need to achieve. And what it does is about increasing the likelihood of long-term employment and longevity, and obviously the company being highly productive, etc. But right now, it's estimated we have over 500,000. Prior to the pandemic, we did do an assessment. We were pushing 750,000, but it's always fluid, as is with the number of union learning representatives. We are very fortunate as a trade union that we have invested in our own platform. And what I'm going to say is the platform that we have is what you would call highly functional. What we have, you press the button, you get what you want. And that's really, really important to us, because a lot of the people that we're supporting through our union learning representatives, many of them will have no IT skills whatsoever, none. And the biggest fear is actually getting over that. So having a union learning representative appear alongside you saying, look, do you know what, you can do this is okay, breaking down some of that fear. The 26,000 learning outcomes, we record and evidence everything that we do. It's very, very important to us. One of the things is because of the equality and diversity. Are we hitting everybody? Are we able to offer courses that go right across the piece and et cetera, et cetera? But what we did is we've covered vocational qualifications. A lot of that would be the electro-technical certificates. The apprentices is the rights and responsibilities, even as to a young apprentice saying, you really need to turn up to work on time. You know, some of the simplistic things that actually take place about their rights and responsibilities. The CPD program is, we have a significant partner called the Skills Network, who we work very, very closely with, and we have our level 2 program that comes through them. And what we do have to have, unfortunately, is a redundancy support mechanism. And some of that is, how do you actually conduct yourself in an interview? How do you fill out a CV? Because for a lot of our workers who've been in a factory or manufacturing or in transport, they've been there 25, 30 years, and suddenly things change, well, a lot of our members wouldn't have a clue. And it's very, very difficult to start navigating around, if you like, IT systems, if at the end of the day, for the last 30 years, your primary role has never actually been anything to do with IT. So the union learning representative, well, it's about raising awareness about the importance of the learning. It's about supporting the learners. And this could be the most simplest thing of all. And it's actually saying, do you know what? I've done this, you can do this. And by the way, we're going to do it together. So you've got that support in there. Arranging training. Often, as with the bottom, is about working with the employer to identify skills gaps. And we keep it quite simple. Often what we do is a paper survey. Just keep a simple paper survey. There might be 5 questions on it. One of them is, what do you want to learn? And that's very, very key. What do you want to learn? Because one of the biggest barriers that we've come across is workers learning to learn again, because they've been out of the education system for so long, right, to actually learn to learn again. But we do promote, wherever we can, workplace learning centres, because we think that's really key, because then you're actually in the workplace itself. But just to give you an indication, this was an independent survey. I'm now wrapping up. 68% of learners with no previous qualifications gained a qualification, and statistics speaks for themselves. And this I use often when I'm talking to employers, because many employers will say, well, okay, what does the trade union offer? I can tell you what we offer as a trade union. We offer to work with you to ensure that our members, the likelihood is they're going to stay in work and stay in a profitable company, so it's here tomorrow and the years as they go by. Very, very important. The skills agenda to any trade union is a big, big agenda for us. No trade union wants to see workers being made redundant because they don't have the skills. No trade union wants that. We want to see our members being the best trained, the best skilled, best qualified workers there are. And we will work with the employers to ensure that that takes place. That's what we stand for on that. Wherever possible, we always look to deliver our learning for free. And even right now is that even with some of our CPD stuff, what I will do is I pick up the cost of the qual or whatever. So that will over to you.
Thank you very much, Kenny. You probably heard from that as well. Kenny was feeling under a bit of time pressure there, because when we were putting this together, I kept saying to all the speakers, no, you're going to be very short. And I know like there's much more to ask you on all of this stuff. So 2 very different perspectives so far, and a third perspective now from Votech, from Louise Rowland. So Louise, on you go.
Good afternoon. It's really pleased to be here, and I've really enjoyed what I've heard so far. And from my perspective, really want to talk about how technology can help build this workforce of the future. And at UFI, we're a charity, and we focus on how technology can improve skills for work, and we do that through grant funding, through investing in early stage businesses, and also through advocacy. And I think for us, here we go. Hadn't realised that was going to happen. I think we all know this. In the UK, we've got a skills crisis. We have immediate shortages now, and also we've got to build the capacity to respond to the ever-changing needs of the economy and the skills we need for the future. These factors in this changing economy are causing this need to continuously reskill. But that's against a backdrop of persistently low levels of engagement with adult learning. It trends at about 40% over the last 15 to 20 years, according to the Learning and Work Institute. So the question for me is how do we grow the pool of talent, and how, I think Kenny's words, how do we help people learn to learn again? Because without this, a fundamental change in how we do this, there's no way we're going to be able to meet the challenges that we're facing. So how we talk about it in our organisation is about levelling up learning. We absolutely need to shift the dial on adult participation in lifelong learning. And we believe that technology and some of the solutions here at Learning Technologies offer those alternatives for those who've had really limited experiences of learning and those who are least likely to engage. If we're going to meet this challenge, we can't keep delivering learning to people who will like to learn, who are engaged in learning and want to do more of it. We have to change that. And we funded 240 projects, nearly £23 million worth of grant investment. And I think there's some examples of how technology can really help doing that. So the first thing is opening up access. So mobile first delivery is really, really important, and free delivery. You may have come across the IDEA platform, and that's about, it's available for free to anyone at any time, where people can develop their basic digital skills and progress their digital skills. So opening up access, technology has a key role to play in that. Building learner confidence. This is a massive issue. We did some work last year and published a white paper, and I think it's often overlooked that confidence is a massive barrier to people re-engaging in learning, and we think that technology can really, really help, because it's often these social and emotional factors that prevent people, starting. The picture here is from a project we supported, the First Step Trust, and they're working with people who really had a terrible experience at school, and their project is about, this is their strapline is learning without fear. So they've taken the level 1 entry to motor skills, to motor mechanics, and they've done all the initial work through VR so that their learners don't even have to read or write anything at all. And I think it's really easy for us to forget that for a lot of learners who've had a bad experience through assessment, for example, that they're absolutely terrified of starting, and we've got to find new and different ways of re-engaging people with learning and building their confidence. And also the opportunity of personalisation. I was listening to a presentation earlier on, and tech really offers the opportunity to personalise content, giving people what they need, not what somebody thinks they need, which is motivating. We've worked with Century Tech, I don't know if you know them, and they've developed a platform for FE students who are doing their maths and English GCSE resits. About 250,000 young people in the UK are having to do maths and English resits. They cannot finish their apprenticeship or their course, get their qualification until they've got that GCSE. And if you have failed and failed and failed and failed and failed, and you can't even get on to the thing that you really, really want to do, it's a massive barrier, and it puts you off learning in the future. And they're using AI to really tailor content to those learners, and it's making a massive difference in improving failure rates. So those are some sort of ways in which we think technology can help. Here we go. Look at this. What's really important for me, I think the key thing here is about user-centric design. If we want to tackle this problem, if we want to grow the pool of people, if we want to have a step change in lifelong learning, which is what we need if we're going to meet this challenge, we really need to put learners at the heart of whatever we design. And that then makes you think about the learning experience, because it's the experience that drives the behaviour change, not content. And someone mentioned this, it was Kenny, wasn't it? You know, technology doesn't, just because technology can do it, it doesn't mean that that's the right way. So if a form's the right way, a form's the right way. VR could do loads of things, but is that really the thing that's going to solve your learning problem? So those are my thoughts. If you want to know anything else about our organisation and what we do, we are an independent charity. Grab your phone, but I'd love to connect with people here or on LinkedIn. And looking forward to the questions, as long as they're not nasty.
We can't promise that.
No.
Thank you, Louise. All right, good people. So 3 very, very different perspectives. I think it's just brilliant that we've got such difference. We've been talking about diversity. We've been talking about diversity of thought. I think we've got some potential for a really good conversation here this afternoon. Just before we go any further, who in the room learned a new skill over the pandemic? Did anyone? Is there any banana bread knitters? Any sort of anyone decided they were going to build their own log shed? Mariam, what were you up to over the? You learned horse riding? Okay, yeah, good. Not virtually. No, just checking. Others? What other skills do we have in the room? You learned piano? And no, we're going to give you that one. You've learned piano. We're all good with that. Like, just own it. It's fine. Oh, and you were using an app for that? Okay, brilliant. All right, so we've got so there's different ways of skill development. Jack? Parenting. Okay, was there an app for the parenting or a book? Yeah, like they always say that, don't they? They don't come with a manual, and yeah, okay. Just had to. Outsourcing is the way forward. Okay, brilliant. So good to know. All right, so questions. What questions do you have for the panel? What's coming up for you when you think about future skills? Do we have any questions left for all of this at the end of the day? Gentlemen here, have we got a roving mic anywhere? Is that okay? Are you all right to use a roving? Perfect. Well, I'll hear you and the panel will hear you, but everybody else might not. So, thank you.
So, thank you very much. And this is actually probably a question more for Michelle. Going back to your skills-based survey that you've been doing and undertaking. So, in my company, we just started to really delve deeper into the skills that all of our roles require. And in my team, we're starting to generate, your skills analysis, or we're calling it a skills matrix. For each role within the business, what the skills are required. I think the biggest mistake maybe we may have made is that we left that as a bit of a free rein for managers to tell us what the skills are for those roles, because they're closest to those roles. And now I have 650 skills for 100 roles, and I'm a bit overwhelmed. And I'm just wondering if you've used a comparative list of skills, or a compressed list of skills that you've said, whatever your actual role requirements are, they need to categorize into these 60 or 50 skills, or have you just listened to every role and generalized it yourself?
Yeah, I manage the skills library too, and I had so many arguments with people that I said, no, that skill exists, we're not adding it again, so I know your pain. So the way we approached it is in our job architecture, we had job descriptions, so we knew roughly the skills that were required, and we also knew transformations that were happening in our retail or customer ops space that we knew digital was coming in, digital aid. So we had a sense from the business of what those skills should be. I was lucky that I had a Python coder who could build a bit of a model for us. So we proposed the skills on an Excel template. We found, I won't use the word SMEs again in the same way, but we found experts, people in the business that reviewed our suggestions, and they were voting. So it's yes, I agree, no, remove, or it's a high priority. So we got all the feedback, and then we had a look at what the feedback was. To address your situation, we capped our skills for that very reason, because otherwise your list is exhaustive. And we said 15 max, so that forces a prioritization, and also people can't develop thousands of skills. I'm a believer in do a couple of things really, really well. there's companies that just decided to go after DevOps and that's all they trained on. So we capped it at 15 and we identified some skills for our leaders. And then I looked at the skills library, and that's how we're able to then just cross-check and make sure that we had one entry for audit, for example. And we had a macro and a micro, but essentially we started to cluster our skills. And I'm very brutal. If someone comes to me and wants to add a skill, I say, have you checked the skills library? I think you'll find no. And someone says, is fintech a skill? And I say, well, actually, fintech is APIs, or you're developing platforms. So I'd argue that's an application of the skill. We get confused now with the word skill. And actually, it's domain, and you're applying a skill in different domains. So, it took a good chunk of time to get through. I've got to go through a refresh cycle for September, so I'm hoping it's going to be a bit more of a speedier process, but best of luck.
Brilliant, thank you.
And Michelle, I know that question was put to you, but I'm curious as to how that's landing with you, Kenny, and you, Louise, as well. Have you got anything to add to that, or?
I really struck by your point that we're getting confused about the word skill. So if people whose job it is day in, day out to do skills and to do HR, I think for me, if we're going to meet this challenge of upskilling, reskilling, there's also, we've got to challenge ourselves on the language we use and what that means for learners. So young people are being told I need to improve my digital skills. Well, what does that mean? I talked to a bunch of college students the other day, and they asked me what my top tips were for digital skills, and I said the snipping tool. Do you know the snipping tool? It's ACE. These are the things that have really helped me in my career, and know your way around a spreadsheet. You don't have to be a genius, but these are the digital skills that have really helped me, and I think we collectively have to really challenge ourselves, because I think language is becoming a huge barrier, and if it's a barrier to those of you who are in the thick of it, with loads of resources and support are available to you, then it's huge for those people that are actually trying to upskill and reskill.
And I'm curious as well if there is a risk of spending lots of time defining rather than developing. So I'm just, as you're saying that, I'm just curious, we could get really kind of caught up in the semantics of it and then not get into like the working it through, or the developing the skills or supporting that. Kenny, anything from you?
Interesting enough on language is that often when I mention the word trade union, a lot of people I speak to, it doesn't apply to us because we're not unionised. It's a real common theme. But the role of a union learning representative is exactly the same as a learning champion in the workplace. There is no difference. A union learning representative has statutory rights, but if you think of a learning champion, then you can mirror that, whether you're unionised or not. Obviously, we prefer you to be, but if you're not, a learning champion can be just as effective as anybody else. Interestingly enough, the requests we get, the main ones in the past have always been IT, but a very low level, a seriously low level. And then we get the progression of that. But what we did find is that the moment we got somebody onto a course, what they've bought into, that's the key. That's why we do the survey. And the big question for us is, what do you want to learn before we sort of sit down with the employer? But the employer knows the strategy we've got. It is actually engaging with the learner and then actually dealing or working with the employer to say, we need to get this to start the ball rolling. Because a lot of employers out there right now, they're scratching their heads, how do we actually get our workforce to a level that we need to be able to compete in the market? Not just in the UK market, in the European market, in the global market. And none of the companies where we're organised are immune. They're very much in that and about the standards that are required. Certainly when you deal with a globalised company and then you've got company in the UK in competition with the same company, say in Germany or another company somewhere else, but it comes under the same umbrella. But what we find is that if we can get the first buy-in of what course do you want to learn, everything else after that follows suit. But a learning champion is equally as important in a non-unionised workplace as it is into what we call a unionised workplace.
And does accessibility come into that at all? So does access to technology, platforms, mobile phones, Wi-Fi, does that have any impact in your view as well?
Yes. If you're asking me, is one of the things that we had to do was develop our own learning platform, kept it as simple as possible, so we don't have like 650 or anything like that. We do have significant partners, and they're very, very important to us because, if you like, that's the skill behind the platform about delivering the qualification or the course. So that's really important. But what it is that the union learning representative, or maybe the learning champion, actually takes the learner there. And that's why Workplace Learning Centre becomes so important, because people will do their learning while they're at work. So it's not alien. That's one thing. The other thing is we try and work with employers so that for every hour the individual gives to their learning, then the employee will have a paid hour. And we have quite a few agreements with employers that will do that, simply because they see the benefits. And often with the employers that we're dealing with now, they are thinking 3, 4, 5 years ahead of not the skills they need right now. They know what they got short of, but they really need to focus on the work and the work they're going to do to know where they need the workforce to be in 5 years from now.
I think this idea, it's not an idea, it's a thing, isn't it? The digital divide is really important for us to think about when we're thinking about this challenge, because fundamentally we have to grow the pool engaging in lifelong learning, and there's things we can do in designing learning technology so it's more accessible. We can make sure that mobile learning is designed for people who maybe don't have the latest mobile phone. We can be really conscious of how much data a particular app or application might use. So I think it's a really, really important thing. But I think the argument can be made, and I think employers are hearing that. So several years ago, we worked with an organisation called Cuppa, and they sort of led the way in delivering mobile-first bite-sized learning to care workers who generally probably have a level 1 qualification, possibly, but fundamentally don't have any time. So this was mobile-first learning. It was called Cuppa, so that you could do a little sip, bit of micro-learning whilst you were on your coffee break. And piloting that with a couple of big care homes, and their first response is, we don't allow care workers to have mobile phones. And actually they saw the benefit of this and actually changed their policy and started providing care workers with mobile phones, and that delivered lots and lots of benefits. But I think that we need to solve this challenge. We need to think about who it is we need to encourage to learn, and in our practice and in our design of learning technologies, we need to think about the things that inadvertently can create barriers to those people engaging with learning.
Thank you very much. I've come across that in the retail sector before as well. So it's quite hard for if people are working in shops, they cannot be seen to be on their phones. So when do you get the time to? When do they get the time to do it? And does that end up being outside of paid time? So there's all these sort of little things that can be barriers. Okay, thank you. Next question, please, Jack.
As long as it's not a parenting question, because I'm not sure what that is.
We've not got the time. We've not got the time for all my questions around
My
it.
son passed his driving test this morning. I'm not sure what's going to be like when I get home.
So it's really interesting to be in this session, because I was in the sort of skills taxonomies ontology session before this, and that for me is sort of really cutting edge right out there. And this is what I would call almost starting from the start and building up where people are. So there were some really interesting stats. So Louise, I think, talked about 11% of unfilled roles. There's a cost to that. Percentages around qualifications and where levels and people. And I know building that skills library. So while you might not have, here's the impact it has delivered, pounds and pence, closed gaps, etc. What are your hypotheses around that, or what is the beginnings of success that you're seeing as a result of the things that you're putting in place?
Excuse me, just get my paper because I've got the answer.
So hypothesis around
The impact.
So if you don't have that, here's the impact that we've shown, we've closed the gap in 11%. What do you believe the hypothesis is, or what are the beginnings of success that you're seeing?
nice. Okay, Michelle. do you want to-
Yeah, so I was laughing when we were talking about learning hours in the session. I don't like learning hours because I get that there were probably an internal measure, and it was the curiosity session. Simon Brown was talking about learning hours. And I want to get to the impact and the so what. So I think I'm bringing in other KPIs as a balanced view, because learning hours suggest formal learning. And if we're moving to projects and experiences as a way of learning all the time and on the job, we need to think about what's the narrative around that and what do we measure. So don't know what are other people doing. Please tell me, because I need to go back with another set. But we'll be looking at, say, the percentage of people taking internal opportunities versus going externally. That's one measure. Retention, our engagement surveys. Engagement has a link to customer NPS, interestingly. So there's lots of other impact measures that, yes, we can't directly tie into skills, upskilling, reskilling, but actually they can in a way, because you need the right capability to build the business and move them into the right roles, and that they are successful and happy and productive. So those are the measures. And then ultimately starting to think about business measures. So in my Tech Academy days, we're doing cloud programs, so moving around cloud native, and we actually had a business KPI that we had to hit. We brought that into our learning program as a way to show that we were business aligned and not just showing how many hours someone had done on a cloud course. So that's something I'm looking at. I don't know, what do others think?
Nice, thank you. I'm going to come to you both in a second. Is there anyone out in the audience who's doing this? Yes. Oh, you were going to ask another question. Right. So, anyone else? Anyone sort of doing any input into that so far? Okay, I'm going to hand over to Kenny then, and then we'll see if
you can sometimes turn these questions to the impact of not. All right, so let's actually spin it around. Is that what prize the longevity of your business if you don't invest in the workforce that you employ? And one of the things I haven't mentioned so far is the amount of migrant workers that we have who will have abundance of skills that aren't being tapped into, and the importance of having a real ESOL, English for Speakers of Other Language program, because the amount of skills that are actually being used. Just go down Canary Wharf. You'll go and see thousands of cleaners working every night with an abundance of skills that aren't being utilised. It's a waste, absolute waste. Somebody said to me once, why has they got all the lights on at Canary Wharf at night? We should be saving the money. It's to stop cleaners falling downstairs. That's part of the reason. And we've got cleaners there that got high skills in hospitality, high skills in health and care. I even remember one of the guys from Colombia even had a pilot's license, but it just wasn't being utilised. But if we talk about the impact of Exchequer, it isn't in England anymore. We used to have the Union Learning Fund. The last time it was about £12 million, 25, 26 unions bid into it. Unite was the biggest beneficiary, but it was the biggest contributor as well to the outcome, so it stands to reason. But an independent survey was done by the University of Exeter. It was commissioned. And the Unite project, what they did is they took all the learners, the courses they did, the impact, how it worked right across. And the impact of the project, the learners benefited by 199.8 million. Employers, they had 125.8 million, because you got the multiplier effect. So that we had a project worth £1.9 million, and all of the income and the multiplier that went through, it ended up with a return to the Exchequer in excess of £94 million, or £2.20 for every £1 spent. So in Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, the Union Learning Fund still exists. We don't have that in England anymore, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is that the impact is significant, but the impact of not is even more significant.
Thank you. Yeah, very good point. Louise, anything from you?
I've got a couple of points, and they're not necessarily linked, so I'm just going to put them out. I think I was in the room next door earlier, and the guy, I think from Swiss, something was talking about learning equals work, and we need to get to a place where that works. I think that works really well if you're in a big corporate. In the UK, actually, more people are employed in SMEs than they are in major employers. So one of my hypotheses is, why would an SME invest in its people if there is a huge risk that as soon as they're upskilled, they're going to go and work for someone else, because we have such a limited pool of talent. That's what's happening in the engineering. That's happening in the engineering sector. So that I think is something we need to think about to solve this challenge. I also think, there's a sort of tricky set of things coming together. So it's really hard for businesses to invest in different ways of doing things. This is my hypothesis. If there isn't the business case for doing that. Well, even before technology, it was really difficult to measure the impact of training. Happy sheet, hierarchies, moving around a circle, those sorts of things. But if we don't innovate, nothing is going to change. And then you have the educationists. I'm not one. I might say something offensive here. Where everything has to be evidence-based. Well, how can you take those risks if we're really wedded to models of doing things? So I think, I think there's such an opportunity for tech to be disruptive, but we have to find different systems and different models of doing this, or we're just not. We're just going to be dancing around the handbags on solving this problem. So, as you can tell, I feel quite passionate on that particular issue.
I do, and I'm enjoying the fact that you've evoked dancing around the handbags. I think this session is all the better for that as a metaphor. Thank you. But yeah, I absolutely get the point around how do we use technology, how do we disrupt, and if we're only evidence-based, it can lead down a particular track. So yes, for sure. That's okay. All right, we have 2 more questions. So there's one from this lady here, and then I'm going to come to you, sir, after that, if I may. All right, what have we got?
Oh, God. Sorry about the northern accent on the microphone here.
Never, ever apologise for northern accent, ever.
It might be more directed to Kenny on this one. We have, in our organisation at the moment, quite a large number of colleagues who, due to the pandemic, have been forced to go through reskill. So the tasks that they were doing before their role, which they've been doing for 10 plus years, was very process-driven, back office process-driven. Due to the pandemic, that was changed to online. Just to give you background, it was prescription, where NHS, so prescriptions were done online during the pandemic, so it wasn't a manual process anymore. So those colleagues are having to be redeployed somewhere else into the business itself, but now going into customer-facing roles, so it's a bit of a shock to the system. They've been in the back office just doing the prescription post coming through for 10, 20 years. Now they're going into customer-facing roles. So the discussion around the workplace learning centre, just have you got any kind of advice, lessons learned, tips? Who are your stakeholders to get involved in that? Who was supporting? Did you have HR? Was it learning teams? Was the managers? How did you set them up and roll them out? Just, I suppose, anything to...
That's a lot of questions.
Any advice,
I
suppose, in that, then.
Okay, so I want to know...
Lessons learned.
I need to know everything. So we might only get to lessons learned, and you
Anything
guys
at all in
totally
terms
need to
of
have
that.
a conversation.
Yeah. Anything at all in terms of that kind of lessons learned. Did you learn from
Fabulous.
when to get the buy-in, who from, things like that?
You said you're in the NHS, didn't you?
Yes.
Right. We have actually got learning centres. So the last one I think of is at the QE in Birmingham. But when you said who gets involved, the answer was yes. What tends to happen is you'll have more than one trade union. You'll have Unison, who could be the dominant trade union. Unite will be involved, GMB would be involved. Usually what happens is that the trade unions work together with the employer on such as this. But as a workplace learning centre, it doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing. It has to be a safe space, right? And the safe space can be identified quite easily. Because what happens is that you'll find an area that's not being utilised. It could be the training room, you double it up, etc. There'll be an abundance of IT equipment, unused, that might be slightly out of date. That can be incorporated into there as well. Then you'll have the union learning representatives who are elected by each of the trade unions. They would work together. Quite likely that they would do a survey. We don't share the survey. The overall results we'd share with the employer, but not the individuals, because that's where the union learning representative will be very important, supporting the individual, because that can be highly sensitive and highly confidential. So the union learning representative would keep that. But what we find is that the managers tend to buy in fairly quickly because the training times tend to get reduced and things like that. I can remember several years ago, it was in a transport or bus company where the union learning representatives themselves identified an unused area linked to the engineering workshop. So they got together, they cleared it out, they painted it. They asked the drivers themselves, have you got any old IT equipment you don't want? And the guys would turn up with an old monitor, you know what I mean, really heavy and things like that. They had their own library that went from quantum physics to how to fix a Ford Fiesta. You know, you just had a really wide library, etc., etc. But they built it themselves. And that was 21 years ago. And they're dead proud of it, and they keep it today. And the thing about a learning centre is, it is the safe space where a learner can go, knowing full well, right, that they're going to get support from a union learning representative, and able to learn at a pace of their choosing, doing a course that they choose that they would have the confidence in. Because if the learner hasn't got the confidence, you ain't going to get them in. So, do we do it in the NHS? Absolutely yes. Is it multi-union? Yes. Do we have learning centres? Yes. And if you speak to some of your colleagues, you'll probably find some that are around that you can use as a model.
Thank you. Michelle, Louise, anything from you on learning centres? Do you have an equivalence or any experience of that in your organisations?
I think I'd just add to what's really interesting about the Union Learn model is how the technology, the platform, and the human, the Union Learn rep, they're in it together. And I think there was a time when people were worried that the machine was going to make the human redundant trainers, teachers, and I think certainly through the pandemic, I think we're through the other side of that. The human and the machine are in it together, and actually, in a lot of cases, especially when we're talking about learners who haven't done some for a long while, the role of the human in engaging people with learning and working with the tech to enhance that is really, really important. So it's interesting how you've made that happen with the tech and the human.
I think from my side, there's learnings because we roll out online content, vast amounts of content, and we don't have that human element. If the people lead or the line manager is there to support, brilliant, but how often does that really happen? So we're building an internal coaching pool to provide that sort of human where someone can go to get the support, but that's why I'm so interested on that performance. That I think that's something that we need to develop further.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You didn't quite get everything, but is that enough? And you all have a conversation after this, by the sounds of things. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Gentlemen here, thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you. Just a question maybe about the actually learning experience design. So I think one of the exciting things about talking about skills instead of talking about training, as you all kind of said, is learning on the job and valorizing project and experience. But are those being kind of scaffolded to be intentional learning moments? Is there feedback being added into that? Like, what's the delta between what you're doing today with regards to like on-the-job learning within a skills intention, a skills building intention, versus doing stuff on the job and hopefully you're maybe learning? Have you, in terms of design, have you thought about how that takes place and how the learning can be scaffolded in that way?
Gosh, if you can
Sorry,
tell
this is
me
the
what
last
you're
question of the
doing.
day.
The last question. We're still designing that. I think because of our hybrid model, everyone is pretty much remote now, logging onto e-learning. I think how does someone get connected to a project, learn from others, that whole side? I don't know how we're going to sort of, like the session earlier with Bob that was talking just about this, like redesigning how we build content. It's so interesting. So we need to shrink the number of online virtual classroom where we can. Now, we do Skill Accelerator program, which was 6 months, and they're programs where you're learning automation or AI. So you need data science, you need to be going through a series of content. You've got access to projects where you're trying things out. You've got access to an expert to have that conversation with. So that sort of model works. And I guess we're at that end probably first because we're developing quite deep expertise. But we need to get into how we're doing. So if we just take the example of our frontline or retail and supporting them to shift into digital selling, that could be just subtleties around how they might behave or interact. They don't need to go on a 6-month program. They just need to get put into the position, have support, and similar to how you've just described, your framework is something that we need to think about.
Thank you. Okay. Other opinions on that? Other views on that? Louise?
It's such an important question. You know, the pandemic really shone a light on the potential for tech and really opened up, you know, people's understanding of what it has to offer for L&D. I think there's a risk that we've got to make sure that people just don't think Zoom and online learning is good, and how learning happens is super important, because that's where the opportunities, I think, come from to do things differently. So how do we? So we need to think about how learning is designed. We need to think about learning experiences that embed behaviour change. You know, people use gaming and gamification as sort of, you know, interlock. They're not the same thing. And also for me, it's an extension of. It's not just the learning, but it's also how, you know, the potential for how assessment could happen. So we're supporting a project with, it's called Game Academy, and it's for gamers, and it's harvesting data as they're learning to then play back to them the skills that they didn't realise that they had, and signposting them to other learning. That then also opens up the opportunity for invisible assessment. So user-centric design and blending good quality and pedagogy within that, I think is you know, has to be what we're striving for, because post-pandemic it's very easy to go for the low-hanging fruit, and that isn't necessarily good learning.
Right. The one thing I picked up is one of the things you said was feedback. So I'm going to concentrate on feedback from the learner. When we have union learning representatives or learning champions, the greatest feedback you're going to get is primary. And that's going to be between the learner and the support, whoever is that particular support. But if an employer is investing in the workforce and working with the trade union, it's only right and proper that we actually work with that employer in a responsible manner. And part of that is about the biggest measurement can be how many people did we have involved with learning, but how many people have we got involved with now? So what is your base point? Where are we going to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? And the stuff that we'll talk about is progression. And when I talk about steering committee, some of this is really industrial language, but what it means is, right, it's about a learning team, a learning responsible team, if you like, action team. And that'll involve a training manager, union learning representatives, HR, anything like that. They'll come together and they'll say, well, what are the stats? Where are we? And often what we've done, when we talk about progression, for many of the, what the feedback came to us is that we did have to start at a low level, where some of it was incredibly informal learning and animated learning, which we found very, very useful, so that we could have somebody who hadn't done any IT whatsoever actually go into a learning centre and within 5 minutes come out with something like a certificate of achievement after 5 minutes, because they'd done something. And at the end of it, it was badged, or there was a certificate, and that was taken away by the individual. And then what we do is we get the individual to build their own portfolio. So that even though some of the courses might be 5 minutes to start off with, 3 weeks, 6 weeks later, they're probably doing a course that may be an hour. They may progress onto the CPD that could be 5, 6 hours, etc. So we have the progression growing through. But one of the things I do with employers, I get employers to recognise everything that they do, everything the individual does. Don't discount everything. Because even though at the end of this there may not be a level of qualification, don't undervalue that we've actually got somebody now who's got on a learning journey and where it's going to end. And some of the biggest talent we have in our workplaces don't necessarily have all the qualifications, but they certainly have a lot of smarts, you know, and it's about utilising everybody in the workplace. And that's where we start looking at the feedback about what should we be doing and how do we identify that. Union learning representatives or learning champions. Primary data.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to you in a second to just find out how we're doing against what you asked, like if there's other bits, or if you feel like, you know, but I'm curious about some of this as well, because I think some of what we're talking about now is when we're talking about feedback, recognition, badging, certificates, those types of things, that's really building confidence in the here and now, and possibly appetite in the here and now. So if I have that experience, I might be more willing, able, have a better appetite to come back and do it again. And that feels so far away from some of the stuff that we saw from McKinsey this morning, about like, here's the future skills that we want to do. So it strikes me that there's something really important about both, isn't there? It's about building the environment for the appetite, building the place and the space for everybody to come and feel like they're included, that it's important, and have a good experience to begin with, not feel stupid, not feel like you've been pushed out. But then there's also this other piece, it strikes me, about like, where's the stretch in this? You know, where are we making sure that what's happening in that environment is taking us where we need to be? So I'm really curious about that as where it all sits. I think both are important, but
do you know, it's really interesting, isn't it? So, you know, this is like industry 4.0 for education, and what fascinates me is that in industry, we're talking about digitisation, it's been given a name, 4.0. There's a sort of a bit of a strategy in this country. Germany have got this, as you'd expect, totally embedded strategy about how industry is going to transform and how skills behind it. But it feels like we've sort of forgotten that education and training is also an industry, and therefore it is also going on a digitisation journey. And maybe, you know, your point talks to the fact that you know, we need, as an industry, we need to get strategic, and we need to have a plan for how we do this so that it joins up the parts. From what I've seen, the Welsh government, I think, further ahead than certainly England. You know, we've got to join those dots up, and you know, the fourth industrial revolution, from my opinion, and you know, needs an education revolution, or else we're going to end up in that situation that you describe. We've got the, you know, McKinsey of the world vision of this, and we've got real life for the majority of people and businesses.
And I was very much enjoying the McKinsey vision. I need to chew on it. I need to understand it a little bit more. But there was something definitely in.
Yeah.
Did we? How are we doing? Are we answering? Have we gone?
Yeah, no, it made me think of something else. Like, I mean, there's at least two opportunities, right? When we're shifting towards the skills discussion, like there's obviously there's the learning from project, learning from experience. So basically good learning that gives me skills I need, just not in a classroom or in front of the e-learning, what have you. I think that's the first opportunity. And probably the second one, which you guys actually spoke to a bit more, was the psychology and the motivation of the whole thing, which is to say, okay, when we talk about skills, we don't have to say the word classroom or training or those kinds of scary things. And it's just as legitimate and powerful to develop in these channels as, you know, but people might say even more legitimate to develop those on the job than in our formal learning context. Yeah. So I feel like that skills discussion permits both levers to take place. So,
and
so thank you for making me think about that second one, which I was. And
things like digital credentialing, you know, they offer sort of a pathway to radicalise and democratise and shape so that your skills can be recognised without having to go through a formal structure. It's interesting times.
So I am conscious of time, as I'm sure many of you are as well. We do have time for one more question. So has who's got hello, lady at the back there. It's okay. We have like the most fantastic audience. Like they're on it. They're fantastic.
Fellow Northerner.
Thank you so much.
My question was probably for Louise. Just wanted to pick up on something in the presentation. Love the fact that you've done that. Was it the motor mechanics all VR? That's a really bold thing to try and do, a really bold thing, because it's a practical skill and we do a lot of practical training in our job. And I just wondered, was that sort of a qualification from an awarding body? How much pushback did you get from them initially to do it that way? Because it was obviously for a very niche learner that had specific needs. I think you said something about having had a very good time in education. And also when it came to the assessment part of the sign-off, I'm sorry if you don't know the exact inner details of this, did the sign-off or the assessment, whatever it was that through VR as well? Was it apps? Because I would love to go back to my workplace and say, well, I've got an example of something being done from beginning to end, all by VR for a practical skill.
We're doing the multiple question thing again. So,
let's talk after, because there's probably a few, if that's what you're looking for, there's probably a few examples. I'm super lucky because I work for a charity and our mission is about tech in vocational education, and that means that we can take risks. So we started working with those with our seed fund, which is 50k to do proof of concept stuff. And the challenge with that group of learners, it's not the VR, it's actually really, really understanding what the problem is that those learners are facing and how VR could solve that. The reason I think they've been successful is, number one, that organisation is the First Step Trust, really know their learners, and they work with them in lots of different ways. They have industry involvement, so they work with Halfords and Bridgestone tyres? I think they're called Bridgestone, big tyre company. So, and they have managed to start that conversation with an awarding body to keep them on board. What I've noticed is awarding bodies are starting to catch up. I think the Scottish qualification agency is a bit further ahead, and we've done some stuff in Scotland. But I think those are the factors that have helped them get to this proof of concept, and bringing all of that together it has been really powerful for them.
Nice, thank you. Michelle, any VR
I
use?
did use
I
VR, but we went through it a couple of years ago, and to the point where you don't just use technology for technology's sake. I said, where do we use VR? And we ended up doing a concept to introduce an API learning path. And so I talked about IoT and Vodafone, we have connected devices. The VR environment we created was all about that, so someone could experience what technology could offer to a customer. So it was a way for us to, it was more of an experience that got people excited about taking the learning. But I'm interested in Meta, so I'm starting to read about some companies using this. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could offer a Meta coach to thousands of people, and if we could use AI and data to simulate a real life, that would be quite powerful. So currently looking into exploring that too.
And I'm not sure if one of the Mind Tools podcasts covers this yet, but I know that some of the Mind Tools guys were exploring VR over lockdown, and they were having virtual meetings from sort of different places in the UK. I do also know that sometimes there were hilarious consequences. They're supposed to be really techie, and sometimes it went badly wrong. They would not mind me saying that. So it is such an emerging technology, isn't it? And like how we use it and what we could use it for. But it sounds to me like from the panel, it always comes back to what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? Yeah. So that's often the way. Thank you so much. To wrap up then, fabulous panel, if we are looking at future skills, if we're looking at the skills of workforces globally and within the UK going forward, what do you think your kind of one or two key points would be around it? Like, having been at the conference over the last couple of days or from your own experiences, give me a sense of what you think the one or two most important things are about building future skills. And yes,
one or two.
I have just done that.
So I mean, I think it has to happen organically. So creating great experiences that people want to consume, have support in place, and are learning all the time is where we need to get to, as opposed to pushing out lots and lots of e-learning. And I think it was the CLO, Chief Learning Officer of Ericsson, said will before the skill, and I love that, and I'm going to steal it. But people have to want to upskill, and we can't it's not something we're doing to people. So we need to create that environment where people feel that they own and are empowered. It's probably my big thing. And then diversity of and how we approach that and bringing that through.
Nice. Thank you very much. Kenny, from you?
Yeah, one of the things I'm going to say is probably the biggest support network is those who are employed, the people who are actually in the workplace themselves. And if there's one thing that's important, it's important that the network of support looks like the workers that you are employing. Very, very important.
Nice. Love that. And that's the diversity point as well, isn't it? That's the inclusion, diversity. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Louise?
I think my point is about how we build this capacity to continually adapt to change. There is a stand, they might not still be there, and they have it's a mind-reading, automated, beer-pouring robot. I know the world of work is changing. I had not even envisaged that would be something that a robot could do. And therefore, this pace of change isn't going to stop. So building this culture of lifelong learning and adult participation in learning is really key, and we can only do that if we're thinking about motivation, confidence, and the people who we want to benefit from this.
Fabulous. Thank you all very much. Okay, we are done here. Before I send you off on your ways, and I hope you have safe journeys back to wherever it is you are going to, you are going to have to clap so hard for the panel, because we are now much smaller in number than we were when we started, and that is nothing to do with the panel, and that is everything to do with the fact that we are now in the sleepy slot, and you know, people have got planes to catch and all the rest of it. So please give a huge hand to the fantastic panel and everything that they've put in this afternoon, and go well on your journeys home. Give it. Yay.